Streaming now on IWTV, C4 Wrestling. Check out our schedule for upcoming C4 Wrestling premieres. Watch nearly 200 events from C4's extensive catalog on demand anytime. Featuring Evil Uno, Stu Grayson, Speedball Mike Bailey, Kevin Blackwood, Lou Fisto, Junior Benito, and more.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Business of the Business. I am your co-host, JP John Poz from the Two-Man Power Trip. Of course, joining me is Dr. M. Lavie Marg. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, John, I'm doing well. We have a special guest to start out the show, but I wanted to give a little bit of context for this, and I didn't even share with our guest yet the context of it. It was like a happy coincidences. One is, John, I've shared with you that I've begun some research on a book about the early history of pro wrestling on television. And in my mind's eye, I seem to remember like magazine covers where it would show like kids watching wrestling and then practicing headlocks on another. I wasn't successful in finding that, but in searching for that, I came across Jim Rugg's amazing, I think it was a web comic. Of course, we're going to talk a lot more about it. Biography of Dusty Rhodes, which fascinated me. Fast forward a couple days later, and I came across some of my comic book podcasts and come to find out that Jim wrote a book about Weapon X, which as a kid amazed me and blew my mind. So Jim Rugg is an Eisner and Ignatz Award-winning cartoonist, illustrator, and educator. A lifelong pro wrestling fan, Rugg frequently explores the intersection of wrestling's larger-than-life drama, kayfabe, and visual spectacle with comics through zines, art projects, and discussions on his YouTube channel, Cartoon Kayfabe, co-hosted with Ed Piskor. He teaches visual storytelling at SVA, and as I mentioned, recently authored Wolverine Weapon X, an exploration. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. Great intro. I appreciate that.
Yeah, good job there, Lavie. Yeah. So, Jim, I'd just like to kick it off. Like, where did you grow up? Where did you kind of find wrestling? I feel like that always is tied in because sometimes, me being a Lavie being Northeast guy, basically it's like, okay, WWF, Hulk Hogan, New York, the 80s. So what about you? Where did you grow up? When did you grow up? And when did you discover pro wrestling?
Yeah, I'm from southwestern Pennsylvania, so Bruno San Martino country around Pittsburgh. I probably discovered wrestling, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years old, something like that. Would have been in the mid 80s around that time. I can remember a friend of the family recording WrestleMania 3 and bringing it over and like laying on my stomach and watching that is like the greatest, wrestling moment of my life up to that point. So, around that time period is whenever I become a fan of wrestling. And it was a good time for wrestling because, with cable, you could get wrestling from all over the place. World-class championship wrestling, UWF, of course, WCW or NWA. I'm not even sure what it would have gone by in the mid-'80s. And, of course, WWE or WWF at the time. So I would watch any wrestling I could find on TV. I can even remember watching a little bit of AWA whenever, like, Kurt Hennig was the world champion and, like, the Midnight Rockers came through whenever I started watching there. So I was a big fan at that age. I made my mom, I had a neighbor friend who also liked wrestling, and he was more into like Southern wrestling. So like we would watch things like Bunkhouse Stampedes that he was able to get hold of and things like that. But I made my mom make us Killer Bee masks, which I regret so badly that I don't still have those. I'm not even sure I have a photograph wearing them, but yeah, like everything just captured. Before I got into comic books, I got into wrestling. And a couple of years after that is when I discovered comic books. And there's so much similarity between the two, especially like superhero comics, I think have a lot in common with professional wrestling. And my fandom waned a little bit, probably post-Attitude Era, until podcasts became a thing. And then I was listening to, wrestlers are so good on podcasts because what do they need is a microphone, they're perfect. And I remember Stone Cold had an episode where he described the biggest pop he ever got. And it was in a match it was when Mankind beat The Rock for the championship on Raw. And partway through there's all kinds of different people involved, but partway through Stone Cold comes running out, and the place blows the roof off. But he went through the match basically like a director's commentary, and somebody paired it up with video And I can remember watching that and just thinking like, this is what I have to learn, because I was doing superhero comics. And what Stone Cold and all these different wrestlers would talk about is telling a story through the actual wrestling match, basically through the fight. And I thought, if I can learn how to do that and apply it to superhero fight scenes, that's really an edge, because every superhero comic is, it's the fight scene, right? It's kind of the big part of what makes superhero comics. And so as podcasts proliferated, I just kind of got, way back into wrestling. And now, I read wrestling biographies and I still listen to the podcasts and continue to be a fan, especially of the history of wrestling.
So when you thinking about that, like the connection, like you said, with comics and wrestling, what do you like? Just delve that in a little further. Like, what do you think is the connection? Is it that they're real life superheroes versus the comic version of it? Like, what do you think about that?
I think kayfabe's a big part of it. The alter ego, the secret identity is a giant part of superheroes. And I feel like wrestlers, especially in today's world where everybody has pretty much broken kayfabe, you get to see that. You kind of get to see like, how are these larger than life characters actually put together, behind the scenes. And especially in the history of wrestling, it was often on the wrestler themselves to develop that persona or identity. And so I see a lot of parallels with that. Obviously, traditionally with baby faces and heels, you get the good guy, bad guy dichotomy that, again, is, backbone of superhero genre comics. So I think those are probably some of the main similarities. And also, it's colorful, larger than life characters in both wrestling and superhero comics. So I think that's one as well. It's definitely as a young fan, I think there's a lot of power fantasy associated with both. So yeah, I think the parallels are, you could probably go on and continue listing the minutia that is similar between the two.
What was the first comic you got into as far as comic books?
I bought a random comic at a drugstore when I was about 10 called Marvel Comics Presents, which would ultimately run Weapon X. That was where Weapon X was originally serialized.
Okay.
But my first issue was a little bit before Weapon X. And I bought it because there was a story about the Hulk. And at the time, the Hulk was gray and wore suits. He was like an enforcer in Las Vegas. And the Hulk was my favorite character. And I was like, what is going on? I thought the Hulk was green and wore, ripped pants. And so eventually my curiosity got the best of me and I bought an issue of it. And before I got home, I'm sitting in the back seat reading this as my mom's driving home or whatever. Before I got home, I knew I wanted to be a comic book artist because I was already drawing. I was drawing movie characters. Like, that's probably the other third part of my childhood that informs what I do. Is video stores were huge whenever I was, 10, 12. And I would just go in and, spend hours looking at every cover and trying to figure out what to rent. But I would draw those characters, especially like the slasher movie characters like Michael Myers and Jason and Freddy and Leatherface. And I was also drawing wrestlers. So when I found comic books and I saw the credits in the front for, the artist, it looked like what I was already drawing. And, it was big fight scenes and really cool visuals. And it was like, that's it. This is what I want to do. And at that time, comics were thriving. That was the time of like Jim Lee X-Men and Rob Liefeld X-Force and Todd McFarlane Spider-Man. And these books were selling millions of copies. So it sort of looked like this is the thing to do. These are young artists with sports, 6-figure sports cars sitting outside their art studios. Like it seemed like a really great idea at the time.
Man, those were the days when, especially growing up, there was a couple comic book stores by me, but man, was there video stores. Holy moly. I remember there was a store. It was literally like a little shack and they turned it into a video store. It's like anywhere by me where they could make a video store, they would pop. It would be like a pop-up video store. And I'm like, oh my God, what the hell happened to that place? Oh, Easy Video took over. And then all the other ones at Blockbuster, of course, which wasn't that great compared to like the mom and pop ones. I feel like the mom and pop ones always had better wrestling tapes than like Blockbuster and stuff. Like West Coast Video was good. I mean, we had so many damn video stores around us. It was nuts.
Yeah, it was incredible. What a generation to become like movie fans, because it was just ubiquitous. We would have video rentals in like gas stations. I grew up in a relatively rural area, but 7-Eleven or something would have them at near my house, and they'd have like a little rack. It wasn't much, but it was a time before everything was kind of homogenized and regulated. So you would get all kinds of, you could find weird videos. Every video store would have different stuff, as opposed to, as you get into the Blockbuster age, I think it's a little bit more at that point regulated or figured out, you kind of see the same selection
Yeah.
as the era moved on. But in the beginning, it was kind of like Wild Wild West of like, who knows what this movie is.
Right. I remember Pathmark, the supermarket. They would have like their own VHS, but it'd be so random. You wouldn't see videotapes anywhere else that were in Pathmark. It was like, whoa, what the hell? Like, they get really cool stuff here.
Yeah, those I have fond memories of those days.
Man, and just getting into X-Men too. I remember finding like their comic books were everywhere. We had a couple of comic stores, but just random places would be carrying, X-Men and Spider-Man and stuff. So the popularity of the comic book was crazy too. Kind of parallel with wrestling. Like it zoomed.
Yeah.
It was huge at that point in time. That period was awesome.
Yeah, it was a good time to be a fan. It was a good time to be coming up.
So with you, right, and you're doing that, how about independent publishing versus challenger brands, and like kind of that almost with a parallel to pro wrestling as well? That seems like a very kind of similar parallel as well.
There's definitely some parallels there. It's interesting because, the other parallel with wrestling and comics would be wrestlers compared to the artists and the cartoonists that make the comics. Because there is like, the promoter's the publisher, right? And it's sort of for a long time, there were only a couple of publishers in comics, and you basically had to work for DC, drawing Batman would be the apex there, or Spider-Man at Marvel, or maybe, X-Men at Marvel being their top books. And that was about all you had until the early 90s. And at that point, all the top artists left and formed their own company called Image, where the creators could own their own creations and benefit from that ownership, whether it's licensing it out to make movies or TV or socks or whatever. Marvel has thousands of licenses. Image sort of allowed cartoonists to have that same power, that same benefit. And that started in 92. And that's whenever like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, after they had sold their millions of copies of X-Men and X-Force, they decide they want more control over what they make, and they start Image. And Image is still going today. In the beginning, when they first started up, everybody was predicting they won't last. How to, a bunch of artists, they don't know how to write, they don't know how to run a business, and they had ups and downs. But at this point, books like Walking Dead, Invincible, huge books have come through Image Comics, and they published some of my creator-owned stuff as well. And I wonder, when you see somebody like Cody Rhodes, whenever he leaves WWE a decade ago or so, and kind of goes through the indie wrestling circuit and had his list of people that he wanted to wrestle, in a lot of ways, that would be maybe a parallel with this idea of like, we no longer cartoonists, no longer have to work for just Marvel or DC. There are a lot of options now. And I think you kind of have seen some of that with wrestling, with sort of AEW and TNA starting to be a little bit, I don't know, turn themselves around. You start to see a little bit more options, I think, for professional wrestlers after a long period when it was WWE or nothing. And so maybe some parallels there between the two industries.
I'm going to hand it over. Tag in to Lavie.
So it sounds like our context in terms of pop culture and childhood and growth sort of aligns really well. So my first question is Marvel's World Championship Wrestling or Valiant's Battlemania? Which one did you like better?
Man, that's good. I'm going to go with Valiant Battlemania. I like the wrestlers that were often featured there. I have one of the Road Warriors where they go on vacation. And it's really bizarre and weird. There's like a sidecar. I think Hawk's driving the motorcycle and Animal's in the sidecar. Some interesting artists came through there. Dave Lapham, as well as Steve Ditko, the creator of Spider-Man, drew some of those Battlemanias. So kind of an interesting book and a pretty deep dive, Lavie. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I always loved like seeing comic book like interaction with like wrestling. Now I have a deep cut, and this might have predated your time of reading Marvel Comics Presents. I'm just throwing this at you. Issue 45 was the gray Incredible Hulk against a stand-in, but not too far removed, for Hulk Hogan, and the Incredible Hulk just beats Hogan up and embarrasses him. I'm not sure if you ever read that one and know the backstory to that.
I don't know the backstory exactly, but I did a book for Marvel called Hulk Grand Design, which is like a biography of the Incredible Hulk. And in the back of that book, we would run different things like old covers, because it was kind of a history. and reprint like some old comics. And I wanted to reprint that story, and they said no. The background that I'm aware of with that sort of the relationship is Hulk Hogan licensed Hulk from Marvel Comics for decades, maybe through the end of his life. I'm not sure how long it ran, but it ran through WCW. And there are, you can find the paperwork on it. There are like court documents about it. And it was a legal contract between the two companies, and it was renewed over time. And maybe it was no longer working whenever I wanted to reprint that story, but I did find that story is fascinating. And we actually made a cartoonist kayfabe video looking at that story, because it is such a bizarre, it's exactly what you described. It's Incredible Hulk versus Hulk Hogan. And he just beats the hell out of Hulk Hogan. So interesting comic. I don't know exactly how that came to be, or, I don't think Marvel would let you do that comic today. They didn't let me do it in 2021. So I don't think you'd get away with it now, but what a cool artifact.
Amazing. I'm going to watch your video right after we conclude today. I was imagining that was like something with corporate where they had a directive, like maybe the negotiations weren't going well and they're like, bury him. I actually, when I looked it up through AI and it was wrong, they had Danny Fingeroth as being the editor, and I had connected with him a few years ago. I actually took a light class with him at NYU, sort of like a continuing ed comic book writing class, and we remained in touch. But he's like, oh, sorry, it wasn't me. I have no idea what that story was, but that always like fascinated me. Speaking about like wrestling and comics, like before we get into your work specifically, what's your like favorite, and certainly not to bury any creators, but sort of like one that's maybe so bad that it's good?
You're asking for wrestling comics?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, probably I think the best wrestling comic is Kaneki Men, which we might know as Muscles here in the US, but it's a Japanese long-running manga, and they would have, it's very cartoonish characters for the most part, but they would also have people like Terry Funk and Dusty Rhodes and kind of these unauthorized, based on real people in the series. But it's great art, a very cool comic. Worst wrestling comic, gosh, I'm not even sure what to choose for that. I feel like, I'll be honest, the way and you can see piles, I have a lot of comics. I have a box that's all wrestling comics, and it's really kind of I celebrate all of them. I don't know if there's one that I think of as really bad. Another very good one that's American is called Whoa Nelly, and it's by Jaime Hernandez, who is part of the Love and Rockets team. It's he and his brother both do comics under Love and Rockets, which I consider maybe the best comic ever made. And they took a break at one point, and Jaime did Whoa Nelly, which was about the women wrestling scene in Southern California. He's from like the LA area, and grew up as a wrestling fan, and is just this brilliant cartoonist. And this would have come out in the 90s, and it sort of broke kayfabe, but in a really interesting way, where you would see things behind the scenes, but there were still grudges. Everybody didn't like each other in the locker room, even though you saw that they kind of worked together to some extent. It's a great series, beautiful art, and featuring women's wrestling. So Whoa Nelly is one I'd recommend.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think there was, and it's still in Barnes and Nobles, if I remember correctly, like it was a high-end like art book where it was just, illustrations of that same nature. I don't know if they were made specifically for that or from something like that. And it's a cool book to flip through, and it crosses over into probably some of the fetishization of women in pro wrestling, if that's someone's bag. So but it's interesting, like when you bring sports or quasi sports into comic books, right? Like NFL Super Pro, that sort of thing. Sometimes it could go well, sometimes not, and it's certainly not necessarily on the creator. Sometimes it's like a corporate directive. So as you grew your own career in art, when was the first time that you approached pro wrestling? As I mentioned, like coming across this Dusty Rhodes biography, I was fascinated by it. The pacing of it and the way you were able to tell stories through images with limited words at point, it reminded me of some of Box Brown's work as well.
Yeah, I'm a fan of his work too. Speaking of good wrestling comics, he did an Andre the Giant biography that's good. He also did a Andy Kaufman biography that kind of focuses on the wrestling part of Andy Kaufman's career that I just love. It's a great book. I would do drawings. In addition to comics, I would do drawings, and I would do wrestling drawings. And at some point in the mid 2010s, IDW, a publisher, hired me to do covers for a WWE licensed comic. and they had me do sort of what if covers, like what if George the Animal Steel turned on Ricky Steamboat in WrestleMania 3? What if Bret Hart had screwed Shawn, instead of screwing himself. And so that was a fun series, probably, I don't know, 2015, 2016, around that time, maybe 2014. And, people started commissioning me for wrestling art. So like I have a fair amount of wrestling in my portfolio. Like I have a zine that I call the Wrestling Zine, and it's all drawings of wrestlers, some that I did myself, some that people commission, sometimes publishers, like covers and things like that are in that collection. And it's always been there. It's just a matter of time and finding an outlet for it. So probably around 2020, I started self-publishing, and I started doing more wrestling comics there. And that's whenever I did the Dusty Rhodes and Andy Warhol team up. I did a story about Frank Gotch in the Yukon in the turn of the 20th century, basically going there and working all of the gold mining camp and leaving with a lot of money. I'm trying to think. I did a Kerry Von Erich versus Ric Flair wrestling in the cage from, what was that called? It was a Christmas wrestling match that they did in World Class. And I did that for A24. Whenever they did the Iron Claw, they did a zine to accompany that movie, and they commissioned me to do some kind of story, which was really fun. So yeah, whenever I get a chance, I love to do wrestling comics, and sometimes for myself and sometimes for clients.
That's amazing. What did you think about the movie?
Not much. That's a story that I knew pretty well as a wrestling fan, and I really did not understand any part of that movie. I don't know. It was hard to go in with a kind of a blank mind. I'd be curious for people that didn't know the story at all. I know the movie was pretty well, critically acclaimed, but I just remember when it was over, I thought kind of like, what was the point of this movie? It just was so dreary. They changed a lot, and I didn't really understand what I was supposed to be feeling or thinking after that movie. It just felt like, I don't know what this is. It was weird.
The soundtrack lived in my head for a long time.
Very good soundtrack.
Don't worry, listeners, I won't attempt to sing any bars of it. Do you watch a lot of A24 movies? Did you see The Rock in The Smashing Machine?
I haven't seen The Smashing Machine yet. It's on my list, but I haven't seen it yet, and I've heard it's good.
So now to Weapon X, and this is amazing that there's this intersectionality. There was something I think that you almost had to have lived the time to fully appreciate it, because that bi-weekly pacing was fairly rare back then. They might have been doing it in the summer with like Uncanny and maybe Amazing Spider-Man, but there's something about Marvel Comics Presents where you were just getting fed a taste of the main story week to week. Where was it, 8 pages?
Yes.
And then you had some of the backstories were interesting, some not, but like it was this mystery that was somewhat being told for the first time, but it wasn't exactly clear what it was. 8 pages every 2 weeks, and like you had to go buy it. So bring us back to that time, and like why you want to write a whole book about it, and what people could learn.
Yeah. Whenever Weapon X first came out, Wolverine was my favorite character. I'd only been reading comics for a couple of years at that point, so it was still very new to me. I didn't even have a comic book store that I could access. Again, growing up in a small town, I was buying comics at like the one newsstand in town, drugstores, gas stations, flea markets. And I picked up a Comic Scene issue. This was a magazine all about comics, and they had an article in it, Wolverine When He Was Wild, and it was about Weapon X, and it was the first time I ever saw Barry Windsor Smith's artwork. And I was copying artists. More than I was following characters, I was following artists. And when I saw Barry Windsor Smith's Wolverine drawings, I was in love. Like I had never seen Wolverine look so cool. I didn't know Barry Windsor Smith's work. He was famous for drawing Conan in the 70s and a very good artist. And so it was just all this stuff hitting at once. It was going to be my favorite character's origin story. It was going to be brutal and violent, and it was going to be drawn by this guy that looked amazing. So when the first issue hit the stands, I was ready for it. That was like my most anticipated comic. I was trying to copy Barry Windsor Smith drawings. Such a weird story like you described, like these 8-page installments. I would read it and be confused half the time. But as I got older and revisited the work, because it's another one that we covered on Cartoonist Kayfabe, revisiting that story as an adult and all at once, it made so much more sense to me. Like I loved it as a kid, but the more I read it as I got older, the more I was like, this is really a masterpiece of a comic. So Bloomsbury, who does a series called 33 and a Third, where writers will write about a music album, they got a license to do a similar thing with Marvel Comics. And they messaged me to see if I was interested in writing a book about, any of the characters or storylines or something from Marvel. And I pitched them a couple ideas, and Weapon X was the one that they thought I should do. And it worked out great. I had a good time doing it. I love that comic. I love that artist. So it was a lot of just kind of revisiting it, reading interviews from, the early 90s whenever it was published, and just kind of thinking about it from pretty much every angle I could come up with. So the book is broken into 13 parts, which is how many parts the original Weapon X was serialized in Marvel Comics Presents. And I look at things like what Wolverine was like in 1991, answer most popular character at Marvel, what Barry Windsor Smith's career was like to bring him to that point of drawing and writing Weapon X. And I just kind of look at it from all these different avenues, the history of even Marvel Comics, because the story is set in the 60s, which is when Marvel Comics was originally, the Marvel universe originally started at that time. But we don't see Wolverine in comics until the 70s. But the origin is in the 60s, and it's kind of like this darker, as the world gets darker, like a post John F. Kennedy kind of world. Wolverine is the model for, the 90s superhero, as opposed to, say, a Spider-Man or a Fantastic Four that would have been that 60s post, Greatest Generation, still optimistic kind of era. Wolverine sort of personifies a later stage of comics as we get into darker post Watchmen, post Dark Knight time period.
Awesome. So whenever I have artists and creatives on here, I love to get some advice. My daughter is in a high school for art and design.
Oh, wow.
Her talents are from her mom's side, although my great uncle was an early Hanna-Barbera cartoonist.
Oh, wow.
And we'd have like the cells around the house, and my mom would be like, oh, this is nice. You take some color paper and staple it to it. So we have a few that survive. But I love to get advice for artists, as you are a professor at SVA. So as somebody who's a young person up and coming that has art skills, sometimes people want to knock them down. Oh, it's going to all be AI. How can you make a career of this, and so on? So what advice would you give to someone that has the talents to like keep going forward and find their way?
Well, I don't think it's all going to be knocked down by AI. So I would say it's as good a career as any in terms of, the future's unknown. But if your daughter loves art, continue making art. If she goes to school beyond high school, I would advise her to get at least a minor in business. Allows her to be her own boss. That's a great feature in life. And I think there's 3 parts to any kind of art career. One of them is craft, and that's just basically drawing every day. And, most artists, that's not a problem. That's why we do it. We love it. The other 2 parts are business and audience. And, business, I already said, if she goes to college, I would minor in business, or at least take some business classes. Even if she doesn't go to college, you could do that, at a community college or something. And it pretty much means pay your taxes is the shorthand of business. And the third part is audience. And a lot of artists make a mistake of thinking, my art's not ready yet. And whenever it's ready, they'll come. When I build this graphic novel, they'll come. And it doesn't work that way. You build your audience every single day, one person at a time, the same way that you build your drawing skills. And it's not our favorite part, most artists, but there's a lot of room for creativity in building an audience too, especially in our social media age. So I would say, continue to work on her craft, find other artists that want to do what she does. The easiest way to achieve something is to surround yourself with other people that are trying to achieve it or have already achieved it, and work on building her audience every day.
Awesome. Thank you. Before I turn it over to John, I think maybe a future episode, we could break open that comic book long box with the wrestling issues and just go through them one on one, have some fun.
That would be awesome.
All right, Jim, before we let you go, where can everybody kind of follow you, see your art, and even just your socials?
Yeah, you can buy a lot of my comics, including all the wrestling comics that I've made, at jimrugg.com or at powerpulpcomics.com. That's a collection of self-publishers, so it makes it easy if you want to actually try a few different artists. You can get them all from one place, save on shipping. You can follow me on Instagram at jimruggart, and you can subscribe to my newsletter. It's a Substack at Jim Rugg. I have a Patreon that's Jim Rugg Art. And yeah, it's all from, you can find all of that from jimrugg.com as well.
All right, Jim, thank you so much. This is a great intersection between wrestling and comics. I love it. Thank you so much for all
Me
the time.
too. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Yep, thank you. You too, Jim. Bye. Lavie, let's turn it over to TUBI. Let's turn it over to the news. I feel like it's so interesting because it's like TUBI's out there. They're projecting like, oh, they're going to have more viewership in the future than Fox, and saying all this stuff about TUBI. What's going on with wrestling and TUBI? Because I feel like it's going to hit wrestling more than we realize. Like there's going to be a bunch of wrestling on TUBI, even more so than there are now.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think even like one of our earliest episodes, like you mentioned, John, they were talking about like Fox executives talking about how TUBI, may be more profitable or have more viewership than Fox one day. And it was kind of like, it seemed like an abstract concept, but they keep growing. And of course, they're buying the Roku as well. So then you have these things that could be aligned as well. And it just goes to show the power of TUBI, that they kind of have this YouTube-like strength now. Obviously, smaller platform, but pro wrestling companies, especially WWE, aren't able to say like only WWE on the platform, or maybe the investment isn't as strong to be able to do that, whatever's going on. But TUBI now has AEW, at least like in terms of like secondary plays of a fast channel, and the first few years of content on there. So that's one thing. And then the next, suddenly the NWA is like, we're coming to TUBI. And of course, following the, playing on the charge on Common TV, they then have the replays and the content of the NWA, which is important because we are talking about how previously, they were on the Roku channel, and then people lose out on that. So it's important to have, different places. I know on Comet you could go and you can stream it on their website, but that's, such a tiny fraction of the type of appeal that would go on TUBI. So suddenly on Wednesday morning, Billy Corgan and the NWA will announce a brand new distribution partnership with TUBI. This is from Sports Illustrated at the time. In the new business relationship, NWA Power will air new episodes. To say we are thrilled is an understatement. TUBI's reach and presence in the digital sphere, especially with young fans, is unprecedented. And we're looking forward to sharing our show and our great stars with you as we continue to rebuild this promotion. Interestingly, like NWA, you have to follow the bouncing ball. From YouTube to Fight TV to the CW app to X Twitter distribution, and then Roku. Each one of those, like as I'm saying them, John, like it's reminding me that they were there. Remember, like they were kicked off the CW, and then they're like, we're just going to be distributed on X and Twitter, and we're like, are they getting a payment for this or whatever? Then of course, Evolve is on the Roku quietly. How many brands can you promote, right? Like, so you have Raw, you have SmackDown, you have NXT, you have AAA. So that's kind of the fifth brand now, I guess, fifth programming, depending on how you divide it up. Maybe you could even say premium live events, but that's something else. With NXT, they had been airing later content, but the last time that they did it is March, so that seems to have ended. WoW is not on there. And no new content is on there, but there's older content. And just a piece, because it was supposed to be an NWA talk, and then, all this other stories. Their anniversary show is coming up. They just announced Natty Neidhart. I might have had that as a news item later, but not too many tickets sold for the 2300 arena yet. We talked about last time, John, that it intersects right with the big baseball game.
Yes, but that is interesting too with NWA and going to TUBI. Weren't they just having to deal with that other channel? So they're going to be on both?
Yeah. So right, because last time that they announced they were going to be on Comet, it was sort of like, okay, good, because they'll be on the Roku, whatever. But then they shifted away from from the Roku. So they're going to be on both. The intersection is really only Comet having the rights to air on their website. I think they still will be able to do that, but then like a week later, whatever it is, it'll come to Roku. So if you can have both, and that's really important, because there's really only a certain percentage that will seek out like a Diginet, and whatever those numbers are, as we've tried to dissect them, it looks like a little bit over 150,000. Sometimes it's confusing the way that those are shared. We'll continue to follow Adam Ware on LinkedIn as he shares those numbers in different ways. But he seems very excited about the NWA. It's basically all he posts about on LinkedIn now. So obviously an executive at Sinclair focused on the NWA. That's a pretty good position to be in. But then you have the Roku that people could consume the content in this way. So you have both ends met. And obviously, if you're getting money from both, even better, or that's really the key.
So Natty Neidhart's going to be at that NWA anniversary show, but like we've talked about before, Phillies Yankees are in town. That's sold out. The tickets are pretty expensive for Phillies Yankees, so that's going to be, I think, the which is close to the ECW arena there. So I feel like that's going to be the best game in town, if you will. It's going to be the Yankees and the Phillies. I don't think the NWA is going to draw that well. I think it's a bad day that they picked.
Yeah, Natty Neidhart certainly is intriguing. The first time she came through the Indies as a WWE star, although reinventing herself, and give her a lot of credit for all of that, it was kind of intriguing. But now that she's doing it again, it would definitely interest me more if it was a show in New York. But it's not like the same cachet as it was. So I think still drawing will be hard. I didn't see any like pop in ticket sales once her name was announced, but sometimes maybe like with MLW at the 2300 Arena, sometimes it picks up later, and there's not that many seats to have to sell to consider it a success.
Speaking of WWE, what is going on as far as WWE? Are they leaning into politics? Should they be leaning into politics more? Should they do a show at the White House?
Yeah, so the person that it seemed like that was, or the way it was being reported, it seemed like they were saying that there could be, and then later they were saying like, no, that wasn't exactly what I was saying. But of course, with Roman Reigns and Triple H, and all this intersectionality with TKO, people were talking about the possibility. So not to talk about if there will be, because there probably won't be, but should WWE lean into things a little bit more? My opinion, John, is that no. Because WWE, I think, is more of a cross-section of Americana, that, they draw all over. And for the most part, they've obviously, through the 80s and the 90s, there was that lens, and America didn't seem as divided as it was, that good guy, bad guy waving the American flag. Now, people waving the American flag, like they're like, are you MAGA? Like, which is, our country's kind of messed up.
Yeah, very weird.
Right now. But I think with sponsors and all that sort of thing, it's a dangerous ground to play in. I know the NFL, right? They just announced that their draft is going to be, by the monument, right? So I don't know if Trump is taking any credit for that, but that doesn't feel like a coincidence to announce something big like that. What do you think about that, and WWE and politics and Trump?
I don't know. I feel like the NFL thing just seems like I don't know, something that the NFL would do, maybe more than Trump. He'll probably take credit for it, but it just seems like an NFL thing that they would love to do, and kind of smartly. WWE, I don't know. I feel like they're more Americana than UFC ever was or ever will be, so I feel like it would fit. But I don't know if they're going to go full into the political realm of it, like Dana White would. I just don't see them doing that. Triple H, I know he's been seen with Dana White, but he was more on the health commission. He's trying to make America healthy again, like that kind of stuff. But I can't see him going full bore like Dana White, full bore conservative type of thing, because WWE doesn't necessarily play politics as far as that is concerned. Like, they don't try to split the audience. They want everybody to be a wrestling fan, and everybody should love wrestling. So I don't know, it's kind of a touchy subject, but I do think they're way more Americana than UFC ever was or ever will be.
I'm just thinking off the top of my head, and this is impossible to ever happen, John, but WrestleMania next year is in Saudi Arabia. Imagine Trump sitting front row in Saudi Arabia for WrestleMania. That would be a story.
Imagine that. Oh my God, that'd be crazy. You would love it. Now, just kind of changing gears just a little bit here. Their biggest competition is obviously AEW, but AEW works with CMLL. They work with New Japan Pro Wrestling. I feel, though, with my AEW, won't that take away from New Japan World, which is their supposed partnership with Forbidden Door? So Infantistic Manica and Mania, if you will, the CML New Japan show that they always run. Won't this take away from New Japan World or no?
As we talked about, and it doesn't mean that there's any friction. Or AEW, Tony Khan, publicly they haven't been the best partner with the different promotions that they work with, and they do what's best for them, which obviously is a business that makes sense. It's not a bad thing. So if Fantastic Mania, if it was distributed by New Japan World and they're taking it now, or it was split with Trill or whatever, my AEW is just growing so quickly in terms of who they're signing up here. Kind of Vince McMahon recruiting all the talent, 1983, 1984, right? That it's almost like old hat. Like, do we need to keep announcing the my AEW promotions coming? But CMLL, obviously, that's a big one there. I think New Japan would be understanding if it's if it's something that takes away. And I don't think New Japan's that far away from distributing somewhat through my AEW, because they had done so through Triller, even though they have New Japan World. It just makes sense as well. But just peripherally with my AEW as well, that we've talked about them a lot, produced by Orange Crush, that they're going to have the IWTV title defended on one of their shows as well. So just a little bit a story there. And AEW getting into the theater business, John. I don't know if you ever saw the producers or the episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm about the producers.
Yes.
So this isn't a huge risk or whatever, but that the last match, a Pro Wrestling Rock Experience, will be presented by AEW. I'm not sure if there will be modifications to make it more AEW-like, but I know that a lot of pro wrestlers were involved in it. It seemed to be getting good reviews and so on. So that will be something special for London. I would assume that intersects, when they'll be having their annual or semi-annual big show there. So not a huge risk, but just a curiosity story getting into the theater business.
I've seen the last match back when it was in New Jersey, when Tommy Fierro from ISPW was helping produce that show. He had Matt Cardona part of it. Mackenzie Mitchell was once a part of it. Bull James was in it. Alpha Jr. was in it. There was a lot of wrestlers that were in it. Great actress, Amber Ardolino. She was a part of it. I think she kind of left the production, but she was great in it. So, yeah, it was actually pretty good, pretty fun. I'm shocked to see AEW being a part of it. Just kind of doesn't make sense, but interesting. Maybe Tony likes it. Maybe that caught his eye.
Yeah, I think Tony Khan is having fun with it. It sounded like a good time. Hopefully no actors disrespected Alpha Jr. During the production.
They did not. They did not.
Okay, that's smart. Like in the brewery or something like that. So not a huge risk. Curious to see. Maybe if it goes well, they'll tour it around, bring it back to the US, something like that.
How about MLW? What is going on? Because now we're talking about New Japan World and stuff. MLW is on New Japan World, right? Coming up, and there's a bunch of stuff coming up for MLW.
Yeah, that must be so. Yes, it is somewhere in my notes. I was I almost forgot about that part. So first of all, a triple shot there. Sellouts, and kudos to them, because the 2300 Arena, like I had mentioned a few minutes ago, it looked like their ticket sales were pretty slow for that in comparison to other promotions that they were running, but they sold out those days. They sold out New York. They said it's the most profitable weekend or multiple days of shows that they've had, or maybe most revenue, however it was described. I want to go check that out to confirm. So that's obviously, you take those wins, smaller venues, but you have to know who you are. September 12th in Charleston, that will probably do well. Their home venue, as they call it. October 3rd in Philly. So let's go back to 2300 Arena, John. How do you play this smartly, right? Because once promotions set up residencies there, then it kind of gets old hat, and it's hard to draw whether it's MLW, whether it's Ring of Honor. But when you come there and you make it special, then you could do well every few months, even if there's other promotions that certainly run there all the time. How would you manage 2300 Arena of maximizing its effect?
If you're MLW, you hadn't ran there in 3 years, and now you're running again. So it popped it. Those two sellouts in a row, it kind of popped it. That helped. But if you think about it, it's like maybe it might be almost too much wrestling sometimes at the arena. Although I don't know, like with GCW, for instance, when I went there in May, I was like, oh, there's so much wrestling coming up. There was so much wrestling here. And then they sold out, and it was more people than I've seen it at the arena in a while. So it's weird. It kind of depends on, I guess, what organization is going in there. So MLW sold out a couple shows, but that was because they weren't there in a while. GCW sold out that show. They weren't there in a while. NWA, not so much, but also there's right down the street. You get the Phillies Yankees that day, so that's not going to help. It just seems like sometimes there's too much wrestling there, and I think that other companies don't even care. Like, hey, AEW ran here 10 times in a row. TNA, like, oh, we'll run there next week. Like, it just feels like you have to kind of space it out when you're doing your booking of the shows, if you will. You almost have to realize, like, oh, when was the last time wrestling was in this building? Okay, it hasn't been a while. All right, we should book there. If you're 2300 Arena, you just take any booking you can because it's all money. Like, it's all profit for you. You don't care, if it's sold out. Now you're going to make money regardless. So I just think that if you're that promotion, you should look ahead. Like, even NWA should be like, wow, MLW ran there twice the month before, that kind of thing. You got to kind of check that thing before you start running that.
I hate to ask, but the person with the initials RF, who was running the promotion there,
yep.
have they run shows in a while? It seems like it's
no.
been
I think they're done. I don't remember the last time they ran a show. I think they might be done. They actually, because a buddy of mine used to go to those shows because it was almost like an ECW reunion show. Like Sandman would be on it, Bully and Dreamer. Like they would always have like old ECW guys on those shows, and they would always sell out and draw well. So I don't know. There's definitely like the fan base that loves that style, that old ECW style.
So before transitioning into TNA, because I actually want to ask about Dreamer now, we're talking about it. So of course, as you mentioned before, New Japan World will have MLW shows on there for free. Why not? It's good cachet for MLW to be linked up with New Japan World. New Japan World gets the content, which they do need some unique content. So I think it's a win-win, for everyone, and smart for MLW to continue to link there. But now transitioning into TNA, John, do you think Tommy Dreamer, who was recently let go by TNA, who has been celebrated and then followed by a wave of cancellations, and I certainly wasn't there, and I don't know the story, and haven't done any sort of accounting of the issues. Do you think that he is going to start like another ECW revival or bring back like House of Hardcore?
Somebody just asked me that because they used to go to those shows back in, not that long ago, actually, but they used to go to the House of Hardcore. Like, I wonder if Dreamer will bring back House of Hardcore. And I was thinking, why not? Like, why wouldn't you? Because they were usually successful. It's just that he kind of got pulled in a different direction, and obviously maybe making more money, or maybe it was more profitable to basically become a booker of TNA, and just better for your family, if you will. But I don't think that would be a problem. I don't think, why not? There's no battleground anymore, so I feel like Dreamer might do that. The cancellation stuff is silly because it's all like pile on stuff and after the fact, and they wouldn't do it because he was a booker of TNA. They wouldn't mention it, but now they're mentioning it because somebody else mentioned it. A lot of pile on crap. I don't like that stuff. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's hard, and I want to talk about this with like sensitivity, but like it's hard to like look back years later and be like, you were involved in a spot and you were somewhat uncomfortable with it, but you didn't exactly tell them, or maybe that you tell them, but you didn't. So I think it's a hard thing, like to look back with like a different lens. I don't want to take away any pain or difficulty that anyone experienced. It's just hard, like in the public lens, to know like how to process it right now for each person, rather than being like, I am on the side of good by saying that, he should be canceled or it was evil or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely a slippery slope. So with TNA though, what's going on? There's so much TNA news. I feel like it's almost like insane. You got so much TNA news to cover.
Yeah, so of course, the business news, which we'll cover certainly with our lens. TNA Wrestling announced a workforce reduction designed to streamline operations and sharpen strategic focus and profitability. TNA's strategic leadership team will see an immediate shift. Tommy Dreamer, who has worked in TNA's creative and talent relations department, is leaving the company as TNA and Dreamer mutually agreed to part ways. TNA Wrestling also has come to terms on the release of Tessa Blanchard. We wish Tessa, Tommy, and others the best in their future endeavors. So, Axe, Blake Avignon, the mysterious, has said that Anthem's Len Asper has set a $30 million floor for a potential sale of TNA with his preferred price of $40 to $50 million. The premium reflects toxic debt on Anthem's books that any buyer would be expected to absorb. No deal is imminent, but the number is out there. Additionally, multiple WWE sources indicate the toxic debt on Anthem's books is the primary reason WWE isn't viewed as a buyer. WWE already has the TV reach, audience, and talent pipeline TNA would offer. Taking on the debt plus a TV deal with AMC that WWE wouldn't fully control, making an acquisition far less attractive than simply poaching talent or licensing the library outright. This is great. Tony Khan was asked if he'd have any interest in acquiring TNA if Anthem were willing to sell it. He asked at what price and was given a hypothetical of 40 million. Tony said it would have to be the right price. It isn't a top priority as any acquisition right now, and not something he seriously had conversations about. I got the hate on X. I forgot. Don't tweet too much about TNA if it's going to carry. I kind of said this.
Yeah, be careful, Lavie. What are you doing? Be careful.
Yeah, there's only one man in the financial position to acquire TNA who'd see the value in having 24 years of history as a challenger brand under his portfolio. I put the picture of Tony Khan Wrestling Observer newsletter Booker of the Year. People didn't realize I was kind of like half tongue in cheek. The Road Dogg might be coming. Vice President of TV production Eric Tompkins will be working hand in hand with Delirious on the creative. According to PW Insider, one person described it as they would be co-heads of creative. There's been buzz about others being brought in. Eric is the Vice President of TV production. He's been around since 2008, serving as director. He was promoted to VP in 2025, along with Ross Foreman. Ross, answer my emails when you want to get guests from TNA. But following Dreamer's recent departure, he's been very closely working with Hunter Delirious Johnson on the creative side. Tess Blanchard, of course, was forced to make a choice, as has been reported, between CMLL and TNA, and don't know the booking fee or whatever between that, but she has a lot of work with CMLL and maybe doesn't have to deal with as much cancel culture as she experiences here in the US, although most have kind of moved on. Luke Pardone had shared publicly his role as a digital producer for about 5 years. Has come to an end. What a run, what a dream. I could go on for literally ever. So I would just say this. Thank you to everyone who made this experience what it was. I will never forget it. Then Paul Walterhauser of obviously of movies, but of MLW2 is trying to dunk on TNA a little bit by saying, after the cuts, that they have a street team, that works for free or for gifts or whatever. MLW has a street team, Paul. Carlos Silva then came out to highlight a good rating that they got from AMC, 255,000. So let's stop there, John. So a lot of onslaught of business news. It seemed like they had finally broken through AMC. The attendance was down, but they were kind of doing their thing. And not only was AMC getting viewers on their channel, but people were streaming it and whatever. But then suddenly all this financial news broke. What did you make of it all?
It just seemed like, wow, like I thought they were doing okay. And then it's like, they're not doing okay. Are they selling? Very, I don't know, controversial, I guess, just as far as like whenever you bring up TNA, it's always like doom and gloom type of thing.
Yeah. And then now they're maybe signing a working agreement with OVW. Our past guest, of course, Rob Edwards, has said, we're still ironing out the logistics and everything. There's a development aspect of it. This is, of course, Rob Edwards of OVW. We have the opportunity to give talents TV time, regular programming. There's an opportunity to develop the outside ring. Content is hugely valuable right now. We have 1,400 episodes of content. Not really, Rob. The early stuff was sold to WWE, as has been reported years ago. There's economies of scale, shared resources, commercial introductions. There's a lot of potential rather than just OVW being a developmental territory. I think it's a win-win. Our friend Romy Glazer has been following through her booknitro.com. That's booknitro.com, having nothing to do with the Nitro book, is following very astutely the demographic growth, or the social media growth of different talent in the independent scene and beyond. So a lot of OVW talent sort of getting some of that rub in that way. What else news? TNA signed a local sponsorship deal with Sandman Hotel Group. So that's that. Slammiversary 2,578 on June 28th. So kind of in the context of things, a good number, but disappointing for those that had grand expectations. Looking back on things, really smart that they did not come to Long Island, given the mess of all the World Cup stuff and everything else going on. Albany is looking most bleak with 400 something tickets in a big area. Also, July 30th, so a little more than a month ago, Lucora Center is looking bleak as well, 351 and 370. Chicago looking pretty good this far out, 1517 tickets. And San Antonio is further away, that it's better not to speculate, but not off to a big start either.
What is going on in the world of New Japan Pro Wrestling?
All of a sudden, as we record this, about 2 weeks out, so 3,215. Obviously, you're not going to beat the number of 4,520 of last year, given the retirement. But I think it's pretty good where they are, but also just reflecting on maybe their brand. 7,649 tickets for Forbidden Door, just a couple days away. Obviously, they'll probably get to 8,000 something, maybe even call it a sellout. But I think, a little bit of a disappointment last time. I think we were talking about maybe the Forbidden Door concept is a little old hat.
It definitely is. What about NXT? How's NXT doing?
So just a little bit of the live events and not exactly killing it. Their year-to-date show average is 1,126, according to what WrestleTix has tracked, obviously not counting the Florida Coconut Loop. But June 18th in the Appalachian Wireless Arena, Pikeville, Kentucky, they did 1,090. OVW actually beat them a couple of years ago. Old National Events in Evansville, they did 755, and in Corbin Arena in Corbin, Kentucky, I love these old Smoky Mountain towns, 915. Again, like, it is what it is. Like, it's more developmental, but obviously TKO, they want to make money or not lose money.
What about GCW? I know you love GCW. What's going on with Game Changer right now?
So, John, I never saw any announcement about it. They quietly, I think, canceled the Wildwood show that would have taken place last weekend, and I didn't see anything about it. Maybe tickets never went on sale, so they didn't need to say anything about it. Cincinnati, Brett called it an A-town, looked like a nice venue. Based on the picture and the map that I saw, there was a fair amount of tickets left, but looked like a cool venue to run. They also ran Indianapolis. What's ahead of us? I think that they'll have, if they don't have it already, a sellout in LA. Clearly the strongest venue for them to run right now. Mesa, Arizona coming up. July 4th at the ballpark. So the best thing that we've talked about is that they were invited back. So looks like plenty of tickets remaining, but it seems like something, if you're in Brooklyn or Queens and you're like trying to think about, like, okay, what should I do July 4th? And in the evening, and you don't have a commitment at a barbecue, it seems like something fun to do. Obviously, the first time they're running this instead of the backyard thing, which they'll do the following day. They'll be in Hartford, Manchester, Dallas, Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, Omaha, Minneapolis, of course, with First Wrestling, Asbury Park, the bad boy, Joey Janela, August 6th. How's that looking for you, John? Tickets are still available.
I was just talking to my buddy about it. I might be able to go to that one. It's I think it's a Thursday, if I remember correctly. So that's a little iffy, a little touchy, but that is a possibility. Maybe. I do want to go to that one, though. I kind of not too far away from that. So I do want to go to that one.
Yeah, and Thursday is correct. I guess, better deal maybe on the rent.
I feel like there's a lot of bands that play at that venue, and I feel like they probably have that booked on a Friday, Saturday for like a long time. So that's probably why it's a Thursday too, because I think it's a lot of bands that are already like pre-booked, if you will.
Especially in the summer, that place must always be hopping.
Yep, big time. So as far as anything else is concerned, I feel like we need to go here and we need to go there for your, maybe possibly your favorite topic of all time.
Of course, we're not going to miss it, John. So House of Glory, this may be in my AEW story, might not. Their final live show was on Triller TV. Their next show isn't too far away. So we'll see where they go. Maybe they do standalone distribution. Maybe sometimes it's good to pivot to other platforms where everyone goes one way, you go the other, like Excite Wrestling, which is going with Stream Go Media. I believe Stream Go kind of has launched a number of like different channels. RevPro has their on-demand expansion. They're now on Android TV and Apple TV. In a different type of story, Limitless Wrestling ran their first show in a correctional facility. That used to be a thing. I don't know if all the time in wrestling, but you'd hear about different wrestlers talking about it. And I think there was once a video that came out of matches at a women's correctional facility where they really enjoyed the show. So I guaranteed money. I'd imagine they create a safe atmosphere for you. Everything is set, so why not, right? So that's cool for Limitless. Good for them. Get that guaranteed money. And the most interesting story, I think, like as PBS has lost some funding, you're starting to see more and more PBS get into business with pro wrestling, whether it's just utilizing the space for NWA or AEW to record shows. But according to current.org, viewers of Missouri's KMOS TV are seeing public TV mainstays appear alongside fresh faces. So Sherlock Holmes with Iron Pitbull, Sexy Rexy, and so on. The station began airing 8 episodes of matches from the regional organization Show Me State Wrestling. The show will air at 9 p.m. on KMOS Emerge, a digital channel that features documentaries, mysteries, and lifestyle shows. So not exactly PBS, but their secondary brand. The organization first approached them 2 years ago about starting a show. The station's GM said Tomlinson said he was initially unsure of how wrestling would fit in, but Show Me State pitched the idea again this year and offered to handle most of the production. Tomlinson said he saw the airing wrestling matches after a mystery show could offer a chance to connect with viewers. Anytime we have that opportunity presented to us, that gives the people in our viewing area the chance to see themselves in the community on TV, we try to make it happen. I'd love if they take a 45-minute break and be like, viewers like you help to support your local PBS station. Please buy a baseball cap or a t-shirt. I don't think they would do that, but I think why not, right? Like any form of distribution, and certainly whether it's PBS or PBS2, like that seems stronger to me than like public access or something like that.
Definitely. All right, so let's wrap up this bad boy and head towards the plugs. You follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Have you, Lavie?
Follow me on X, Lavie Marg, LAVIE-MARG. Join our LinkedIn group, The Business of the Business. Check out my long-form articles on LionCubJobSearch.com. And, of course, the book, which I don't have within reach right now, but everyone knows about, Ultimate Fighters. Get the real story of Dana White, Donald Trump, and UFC's road to the White House.
All right. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. See you right back here next week for a little business of the business. See you next week, folks.